This morning is our final program under this grant, and it's a discussion with Rabbi Ben Goldstein and Dr. Samuel Friedman on AI. Before I turn the program over to Rabbi Ben, who will further introduce the program for this morning, I want to thank scientists and synagogues and the Sinai and Synapses program for making all this possible.
So I had the privilege of meeting Sam a little more than a year ago. He's a member of a congregation in Long Beach, and we got to know each other through that. Sam is an interesting, brilliant man, and I've learned a lot from you in the short time that I've known you.
Thank you.
I don't have a bio for you right here, so tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from.
Sure. So my name's Samuel Friedman. I usually go by Sam. I grew up in Madison, Wisconsin. I went to the University of Chicago for undergrad with degrees in physics, astronomy basically, and mathematics. I then went back to Madison, to the University of Wisconsin, have a PhD in theoretical astrophysics. I then worked in the computer science department there for almost a year, and about that time, I met my wife, moved out to LA, and then I got a job starting at USC doing postdoctoral work on computational models of cancer, working on data standards, and we wrote an open source award-winning physics-based multicellular simulator. So we were able to do virtual cancer drug trials. Seriously.
What is that? So tell me what that is.
So what we can do there is we can say, all right, I want to give this cancer tumor this drug at this concentration and see how does the tumor grow or shrink over time. And so we're able to go in and say, all right, I want to do 1,000 trials. Guess what? I can do it. I can also do things I couldn't legally or ethically do otherwise because it's all a computer simulation. And so then we could say, all right, does this drug work or not? Well, in the simulation, it seems to. Maybe we should try it in a clinical trial. But then you're able to start doing things you couldn't otherwise do. Do you want to test 2,000 drugs on an individual patient? That's not practical or ethical. But if I had some data and said, all right, let's start up a computer simulation, 2,000 computer simulations, no problem. You'll probably have it done in a few hours.
So what was was it reliable in terms of the results from the virtual to the real world?
So we were starting to see some of the things that were actually matching up with structures in cancer tumors. So inside of cancer tumors, they sometimes turn hypoxic, meaning they have low oxygen levels and they get these little cracks forming. We could see it both experimentally and computationally. And so we were starting to be able to link everything up, and I left that probably about 2017, so about 6-7 years ago, and the work's continued on since then.
Wow. Okay. So just for the record, as we go through this, if we're using words like aliyah or amidah or aleinu, I can translate those words. Most of the words you're going to hear today, I cannot translate at all. So I may ask you to define. I may ask you to define some of your terms. So I want to go back for a second. Yeah, go. Let
me just finish.
Yeah, please.
So after my postdoctoral work, I then transitioned into industry. I've been working in small businesses since 2017, starting to do algorithm development, image processing, and then about 3.5 years ago, started getting into AI. And that's where I've sort of been since. And the company I'm at now, we use artificial intelligence in order to process documents. And I can show some of that work as well, because it's kind of cool. So.
Okay, great. So I want to go back for a second.
Sure.
To you as a human being. I know you to be a very spiritual person.
Yep.
Very dedicated to Judaism, to your own personal spirituality. I guess it's two questions. One, which came first, your scientific interest or your spiritual interest, and do they feed each other? So it's two questions.
Ooh, good question. I would say my scientific side sort of came first, but when I'm saying first, I'm talking I'm 3 years old, okay? I realized I had this knack for mathematics that other kids didn't, okay? And as I got older, people would be like, oh, I'm not so good at math. That's okay. I'm like, well, would it be okay for me to say I'm not so good at English? Like, it just was preposterous to me that it was sort of socially acceptable to say that I'm not so good at this, and that's okay. And so, I'm growing as a kid. As I said, I was raised in Madison, Wisconsin. I was raised at a Reform synagogue, and raised Jewish and everything, but it was kind of all at the same time. It's like, okay, here, learn the Shema, and here, start learning algebra. Okay, I was more advanced in mathematics, and so I knew algebra and geometry by the time I was bar mitzvah. So it's all about the same time. So, and then when I was in college, I really got interested in science and religion. So I actually have a degree in that as well.
Of course, why not?
I was in college. I said, if I'm ever going to study this, when's the time? Now. So I actually took courses in the divinity school at the University of Chicago. And it was really interesting to sort of figure out how and why people believe things. And so some of it came from the science side, some of it came from the religion side, some of it was psychology, anthropology, psychology, philosophy. There were all these sorts of questions of how do you get it all together. And then in graduate school, my mother passed away. And I asked people, how do you deal with the loss of a parent? I got a lot of platitudes. Oh, it gets better with time. I'm like, well, great. That's not today. What do I do now? And one of the few concrete suggestions I received, go to Daily Minions. Go say Kaddish for your mother. I was like, okay, that's actually tangible. That's a concrete step that I can do. And so I started going more to synagogue, and it's in my 20s that I become more observant, more traditional. And I started asking people were like, well, what's your family custom? I'm like, I don't know. And then I was like, wait a second, I have to go one generation back. So I started asking my great aunt, how do you keep kosher? Okay. She was like, I was 1 of 9. I'm the only one who keeps kosher still. What happened to the rest of my siblings?
Yeah.
And so I became more observant, and I found more meaning, especially when I was in graduate school. I'm working, it doesn't matter if it's 2 p.m. on a Tuesday or 3 a.m. on a Thursday. I could just keep doing my work. What's it matter? And I found time blurred. Mm-hmm. And then I started learning about the traditional ways of observing Shabbat. And time unblurred. Because all of a sudden I had something pinning down my schedule because everything else was just like, it doesn't matter. Okay? And so for all of a sudden, time mattered. Okay? I always pegged myself as a night owl. This was one of the advantages of being in an astronomy department as a graduate student. I could get away with working till 1 in the morning or 2 in the morning. It kind of was part of the culture. Okay, I would see tenured faculty. They'll be like, oh yeah, it's 8 o'clock in the morning. The telescope in Arizona, the sun came up. It's time to go home and go to bed. Wow. Okay, and these are tenured faculty. They have chairs and everything, but it's just what you got to do if you're an astronomy professor, because that's when the telescope is operational.
Okay. So back to I'm going to ask you more questions about that, by the way. I don't think I forgot.
Okay.
Back to the topic. Simply, what is AI, or artificial intelligence?
So AI, in a nutshell, is, as we understand today, I'm going to give this is a different answer than if this were 10 years ago, okay? It's a bunch of software that's been trained, capital T trained, on a huge amount of data, okay? And by trained, I mean multi-dimensional optimization.
Okay, that's one of the...
This is one of those high words up there.
Yeah.
Okay?
Multi-dimensional optimization.
So I tell people, if you really want to understand AI, you need to understand multivariable calculus, because...
All right, I'll see you guys later.
All right, what happens here, okay? I'm going to break it down a little bit here.
Please.
Okay, so these AI software says, I want to solve a problem. It's dumb. It has no idea what to do. And you, the user, say, okay, I think that if you're close, you're going to get this, you're going to get this score. And it wants to get either the lowest score or the highest score, whatever way you want to do it. Right. Okay? And then it says, oh, I got a terrible score. Let me take a guess in this direction. Okay?
The AI does this on its own.
On its own, and
Okay.
it says randomly, I'm going to go this way and see if it's any better. Oh, it was better. Oh, it was worse. And then it tries again and keeps going over and over. And so part of the reason AI has taken off more recently is because there's a couple things have happened. One, graphical processing units or graphics cards for your computer have come around and have become significantly stronger and more powerful and are able to do computations more efficiently than were possible before. The next part is also this huge amount of data. People can go download information and say, I have petabytes of data. So as a reference point, people are usually familiar with kilobytes and megabytes and gigabytes.
Terabytes.
Terabytes is 1,000 gigabytes. Petabyte is 1,000 terabytes. And then we're talking like thousands of petabytes of data that you start training and to say, all right, I want to not look at one case, not 1,000 cases, billions, trillions, quadrillions of cases here.
So, okay, so
And so it all gets trained and says, all right, I want to get the best score on all this data. Now, you can do this sometimes on smaller amounts of data. And you could say, all right, maybe I've got a few gigabytes of data, but it just says, all right, I'm trying to make the best guess I can to the data that I have.
So can you give, so that's a little, for someone like me, that's a little abstract. Can you give an example of how artificial intelligence works? Not show us, but just like on a specific problem.
So let me pick one here. There's now algorithms that do tracking of people, okay? How do they do it? They say, all right, I want to go find where a hand is, and a shoulder, and a head. And remember, I said it needs a lot of data. So somebody goes in and clicks on a picture. Here's where this person's shoulder is. This is where their elbow is. This is where their hand is. This is where their hips, their knee. And they do this hundreds of thousands of times or millions of times. Mm-hmm. And then you say, all right, computer, I showed you this a bunch of times. And you're going to guess where the person is in each picture. And it's going to say, oh, I think it was here, here, and here, and here. And you're going to say, no, that was far away. It was so far off. Try again. And then it guesses again. And it gets a little better and a little better. And then finally, you're like, that did a good job. It found the person and their pose in this million of pictures. And then you give it a new picture, and it's like, oh, yeah, no problem. I did this a million times already. I'm an expert on it. I'm AI. And so then you can start tracking people in videos. And then you can do the same thing with cars as well, because you click on cars and you have a million of them. And then you're like, well, I know what cars look like because I saw a million cars. But then we get into biases, okay?
Wait, hold on a second. So in that example, you're training the AI to recognize
people or cars, or it could be whatever you want.
So it's like, so just to dumb it down a little bit for me, is it the equivalent of when we are asked to prove that we're not robots by clicking on the traffic lights?
Yeah, so
Okay.
where this is coming in, and starts to be a little fishy now, it's like, hey, I want to know which images have traffic lights.
Right.
So guess what? Every time you fill out one of those CAPTCHAs, it's getting training data to know this has a street light, this one doesn't, this one does, this one doesn't. And guess what? It now has more information trained by you, trained by all of us about what images have street lights and which ones don't.
Okay.
And remember, as I said, it's dumb. It doesn't know this unless you tell it. And so this is called supervised learning because it has been with a human undergoing supervision here. There's unsupervised learning, that's another can of worms, but that's not usually how all the big thing about AI these days. It's all supervised learning.
So it's not as if I can take a computer or my program, my artificial intelligence program, and just say, learn the internet. I have to manually input what it is I want to.
Today, yes.
Okay.
Ask me in 2 years.
No,
that might
just
be a different
today,
answer,
today.
legitimately.
Okay. So you said, you started by saying 10 years ago it looked different. So what is the first kind of examples we have of AI?
So the first examples of AI go back way more than 10 years ago. We're talking about like the 70s and 80s, okay? but they weren't like what we sort of see today. They did not perform very well.
What were they?
There were like these decision trees that was or random forests. These are technical terms here. These are algorithms, and they say, "Oh, I'm going to try and guess, why it works well." And what really happened in 2011, there was a paper that came out that released a neural network. I'll talk about that in a moment, called AlexNet.
Called what?
AlexNet. There was a grad student at the University of Toronto. His name was Alex, okay? And it was AlexNet. And so what a neural network is it's, if you know what linear algebra is, remember I said there's a whole bunch of math you need to know. It's just doing a lot of matrix multiplication and addition. So you're saying, all right, this term plus that term, this term plus that term.
Okay.
And it's densely connected. So hold on a second. You're going to need to see my hands here a moment. Okay. And so you have every combination going to every other combination. And you do this 50 times or something. And that was the change in about 2011. It was all of a sudden, instead of having a network that is 2, 3, 4, or 5 of these, he did like 50 of them. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden got new results. And almost every AI architecture that's based on these neural networks, it comes from this AlexNet idea in like 2011 and 2012. And so everything sort of has evolved from there. And so I could talk with you about all these different types of other AI algorithms, but they all stem from this one idea that I need to have a huge amount of data instead of a small amount of data. And that's what we were talking about back in the 70s or 80s.
So these
Yes.
were data points?
These are yes, they are actually data points. They're called weights.
Okay.
Okay? So it's saying, let's say, A times X plus B times Y gets me C. Okay? Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, I'm breaking this down very simple.
No, I know.
What should A and B be so that I get a good result for C?
Okay.
And so figuring out what those numbers are, not just once, but for 1 million of them, you start to get an answer. And so what happens is the 70s, 80s, 90s, the aughts, there's not as much progress being made. And remember, I said another thing is a hoard of data. The internet really comes around, starting in the 90s? Okay, you're able to download entire libraries that you could not get before, okay? I was curious, I'm like, do I want to go see the Cairo Geniza? I can on my computer. I can show you manuscripts. 20 years ago, could you have done that? No.
Right.
10 years ago, maybe.
It would have taken a while.
Start to see it's this change in how the internet has functioned with this huge amount of data that comes in, and then somebody says, like Google, hey, I want to download half the internet or all of the internet. Okay, so you go do a Google search. How does it know where to send you? Because it downloads the page, parses it, and says, oh, I think this is how this should be linked to there. And so guess what? Google has all these pages downloaded. You can actually go to like a Google page and say, I want the cached result, and it will give you its downloaded version of a particular web page.
Wow.
So you can hear what does that need to do to get all this information. And so then we get to some of the other ethical concerns here, because I know we want to talk about this.
Wait, but so is my Google search AI?
Today, no.
Okay.
Okay, so there is algorithm created by Larry Page, one of the founders of Google, called I think it was called PageLink, named after him. Okay, it's linking of web pages.
Very creative, yeah.
And basically says, oh, look, I'm going to look at the strength of the links between my web pages here and give it a score. And the higher the score, the more likely it is I want to see it. So that's how these search algorithms work. If you go to Microsoft's Bing today,
Bing,
because they invested heavily in OpenAI, it will say, hey, do you want to do an AI search? It will.
Okay.
Okay, that's why I say today.
Yeah.
Okay, you can use classical Bing, but you can now use AI-powered Bing. And this was 6 months. If it were a year ago, I would not be having this discussion with you.
So how do those two searches differ?
So the searches differ in two different ways. One is that the AI is very sort of static. Remember, as I said, trained.
Right.
Okay, I had to compute what these weights are. It is, a snapshot in time. Okay, it could be 3 months ago, 3 years ago. If you used OpenAI ChatGPT from several years ago, they're like, I know nothing past 2022, because that's when they stopped the data collection. Okay, so one is how recent what were the weights and the AI updated. The other thing is that the way the classical search algorithms work, I can't believe I'm talking about this classically, but I'm like, it's evolving in almost real time, is that it's going to go in and say, all right, this is how much related I think it is based off a similarity of words, okay? And if it says Rabbi Ben Goldstein, and another webpage says Rabbi Ben Goldstein, okay? And it's going to say, oh, look, I think these two might be linked together, okay? And it starts asking all these other questions and says, okay, I think here's your best score, and boom, there's your top link, and then so forth and so on. And so if you do Google searches, and or Bing searches or DuckDuckGo, you'll get worse and worse results kind of as you go through generally. But sometimes you're like, I wanted to know what synagogue is Rabbi Ben Goldstein at today, okay? Not where was Ben Goldstein a year ago.
Right.
And so, further down it might say, oh yes, Rabbi Ben Goldstein is at Temple Beth Shalom of Long Beach, because that's where it was a year ago,
right.
Okay, not here in Pasadena. And so now you have to figure out what the ranking is of everything here. And again, a lot of it's a whole bunch of mathematics of putting it all together and saying, okay, what's the most related?
Okay, so you were doing something else and you went to AI.
Yeah.
Why? What interested you about AI?
So one, this is going to sound very brass tacks here, work asked me to go in this direction, okay? Why? Because the algorithms were changing. It was very clear, the writing on the wall of the old school techniques are not cutting it anymore.
Old school techniques
of computer vision, of text analysis, okay? Remember I said, how do you figure out, where somebody is in a picture? Okay, if I were to talk to you 15 to 20 years ago, I would say, oh, look, you have to go find the edge of, like, the arm, okay? And so then I'm going to ask, is it dark on one side and light on the other, or vice versa? And I'm going to have to, like, manually sort of find fingers and find faces, and here's what an eye looks like, and they kind of work. I mean, there was Photoshop 15, 20 years ago.
Right.
Okay, it worked decently, but I mean, could you often tell something was photoshopped? Yeah, but guess what? You got somewhere. Okay, and now with AI, it's like, oh yeah, no problem. I'm gonna even know what the noise looks like, know what the image problems are, because it knows, because it's been trained on all of this data.
So
Let me finish your question here
please.
a second. And so you asked sort of, where did I come into this? I could see, look, one, the writing was on the wall, but also it was like, okay, I've got the math background to be able to sort of leap into this. What are these new problems that I can solve using these new techniques? And so it's really a question of like, hey, look, I'm a mathematician scientist. What do I need to know to stay abreast in the field?
Okay, so what is a problem you've solved?
Ooh, what was the problem I solved? So I do a lot more of the applied research here.
Okay.
So I take a lot of times where it's like, here's a pre-existing algorithm and another algorithm, I'm going to stitch them together. Now, this happens a lot in academia as well, because you're, quote, standing on the shoulders of giants, okay, and so you cite a research paper. There were some, actually, this was a cool one. We did localization using celestial navigation to within 3 meters, using some AI, image processing, and some other algorithms. Normally, celestial navigation gets you to within like a few miles. Mm-hmm. But if you say, all right, I'm going to start processing my data. I've got an atomic clock. I've got my algorithms, and I've got all this information about where all the stars are, and I have a star catalog. And look at enough, we're like, oh yeah, you'll get with it in like 10 feet.
So to put it in layman's terms, you helped get a celestial GPS to within a range of 3 meters?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we did other things like, let's see, there was, we were developing a smart scope that went on a rifle, and so we were able to say, all right, here's a person, and figure out where the aim points should be for the military, very seriously. And to say, look, I've had this discussion with people, it's like, why would you do work for the military? I'm like, because one, they're funding it, but also two, there are good reasons to,
right.
Because I've learned about what's called the left side of the kill chain and the right side of the kill chain. Left side is all the data. How do you make sure that people are making the right decisions? Okay? And people were saying, you can't support that. And then Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. And all of a sudden the discussion was like, hey, wait a second. Can we take this and give it to them? And so again, it's the same technology. Mm-hmm. Nothing has changed except people's interpretation of that technology.
So where are we now with AI? What are its strengths and weaknesses?
So its strengths and weaknesses. The weakness, in some sense, is that AI is still very dumb, okay? Because you have to tell it everything. Mm-hmm. Okay, now it's getting better because people have spent time on it, and so it's getting stronger. Like I'll show you ChatGPT, and if you haven't seen it, you really should see it. Okay, but that's because people spent the time and money to be able to make it smarter. Some of its strengths is that it can exceed human capabilities in some cases, because it's going to say, all right, I'm going to do more than a person could ever do.
Meaning?
So let me give an example. Chess, okay? Yeah. We're able to beat people. Go, the game Go, with like placing these tokens. And then I'm guessing you don't play a lot of video games.
More than I care to admit.
Okay, so Dota, Death of the Ancients, this is a Warcraft 3 game. They're able to beat the top human players because they played millions of games, okay? And it learned, if I put this unit here and I do this, it does well or doesn't do well. And so it can play, and it can play against itself.
So for example, for the chess, right? Yeah. I'm again, disclaimer, I am not a mathematician, but I would imagine that at however large it is, there are only a certain number of moves possible on a chessboard. So the AI can play, maybe not all, can it play every single possible combination and permutation of the game?
So it could, but remember, now
it
chess
needs us.
It's also sort of open-ended. Like you could, get into stalemates, and so it will go on infinite. So you have to kind of give it some guideline and say, look, you're in a draw. You're not going to ever end, okay? But you can give it guidelines and say, look, I want you to play trillions of moves. And it says, okay, fine. We have these clusters that, you go hire for the cloud computing, and you're like, okay, they have millions of computers. So you pay for 1 million computers for an hour. If it's, say, a penny an hour, okay, that's $10,000. And you just got 1 million computers for an hour.
To play chess.
To play chess, to play Go. But then it winds up being other things. There is a big problem in biology called protein folding, okay? It says, all right, I'm in biology. I want to know how I turn DNA into RNA, into proteins, because proteins are really how a lot of biology works. And I remember being in college, and it's like, this is going to be solved maybe, like, if we're lucky, in 50 years. In 2020, DeepMind released AlphaFold and basically said, we're done. Okay, we've folded 2 million proteins, and like the scores were over 90% accurate.
So what is that? What is the
And so what
the
that
practical-
means
yeah.
is it's like, oh, I want to know how a drug interacts with a cell, because I then need to know how the protein interacts. And one of the big questions was, what's the shape of the protein? How do you do this? It's incredibly difficult to compute normally. With AI, they were able to do it basically in 2 years.
So there's also, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is a way in which AI is now better than our physicians at,
Oh, yeah.
at what is it, cancer
Detection.
detection.
And a lot of other things. And so there's questions of what happens about rare cases. How many cases can one doctor see in
Right.
one's life?
Right.
Okay. And I remember this was 2008. I was in graduate school. I met an astronomer. He classified 100,000 galaxies by eye, like just clicking over and over, okay? So what we're talking, and that was years of work. So we're talking what? Maybe a few million cases, 10 million if we're lucky, okay? And all you're doing is staring at a screen all day, not really seeing patients,
Right.
okay? AI says, I can see 1 billion, no problem, okay? And so it says, all right, I know what to look for because it says there are cancer cells here. And the weird thing is you don't even have to tell it what the regions are in some cases. You can just say, hey, look, I know there's cancer cells here because, we diagnosed the patient. You tell me what they look like. And it'll say, yeah, I found what's similar between 1 billion different images. And so that's why I can beat the humans, because it just saw more. And
So it can diagnose the cancer once it's been diagnosed, or it can detect cancer we can't detect?
both.
So it not only can tell you whether or not you have cancer, but it can tell you the stage?
Yeah, it can do things like that. So, I mean, there's a statistics term here, are false positives, false negatives. It has fewer errors than people make in many cases.
Wow.
And so this is when we start calling it, quote, superhuman, because it's beyond the human baseline ability, because everybody's human, we all make mistakes. Well, what if I could make humans make fewer mistakes? That's kind of hard. Okay, what does it take to make a computer make fewer mistakes? Well, the answer is more data, more time, more money. That's relatively straightforward now.
Okay. So we're going to transition for a moment. We're going to use, what is it, ChatGPT?
Yeah, ChatGPT.
So
here.
we're going to create something together. So you all are going to, how many of you, just by show of hands, have used ChatGPT? Okay, so about a quarter, third. So if you haven't, it's to say it's interesting is an understatement. What is something we can do with it today?
All right, so
This is like improv, but with artificial intelligence. We're going to give it, a scenario so you can see.
And I'll also show you Gemini, from Google, which just got publicly released last week.
Oh, great. Okay.
Okay.
So who made ChatGPT? That's
So
not
the
Google.
ChatGPT is from a nonprofit organization called OpenAI. They have been heavily invested by Microsoft. And
Gotcha.
when I mean heavily invested, we're talking at least $15 million. Actually, it might be more. I don't remember the exact number, but
Right.
I could even ask ChatGPT. But like there was a possible revolt in OpenAI a couple months ago. And they
Yes.
almost all went to Microsoft.
Right, I saw
so
that.
They all did it.
Right, because
Okay?
the guy that was fired at ChatGPT, at OpenAI, was rehired, right? Yeah.
Yes, with
the board
over the weekend,
versus,
basically.
right, yeah, I saw that.
I'm going to go with a suggestion here that I had done the other day. Please make up a Devar Torah for this week's Parsha. And you're going to see why it's dumb here one moment. Okay? It doesn't know this week's Parsha. Okay? It can't tell you what the calendar is. Okay? And so you can see it's talking about, hey, let's assume Noach. Okay? It's just, and it's actually writing a decent drash about Noach.
No, it's not.
Okay? You're talking about the concept of righteousness in a corrupt world, the concept of renewal and second chances, and it's just going to go here for a little while. I can also just make it stop if I really wanted, but I'm just going to give it a moment here.
Wow, it's just like a rabbi. It doesn't stop. Even doesn't know when to stop. You could have said it in 10 words. You're saying it in 150. All right, great.
And when I asked it earlier today, the same thing here. You can see Parsha theme analysis. I asked it, please write me a 10-minute long Devar Torah about this week's Parsha. It says, I don't know. Right. And it just said, give me some rough ideas of how you write a Devar Torah. Okay? And so, look, it said this time, oh, you mean Noach. Okay?
Okay.
So I'm going to say, give me a 3-minute Devar Torah this week's Parsha is, Truma. Well, it should be able to handle the typo. All right, and it's talking about the tabernacle as a dwelling place, the essence of giving, because people had to be able to give, to build the tabernacle, the diversity of contributions. You can see it's making this up on the spot, okay? And then I asked it, again earlier, hey, look, can you talk to me about the measurements of the tabernacle and how that makes about the measurements of ourselves? And it was able to generate, all of this. And this is literally on the fly here. Okay, you can see the power of collective action, the beauty of diversity and contribution, creating spaces for spirituality in our lives. How do we make space for Hashem? How do we contribute to the world around us? How do we build a sanctuary for Hashem, but of love, kindness, and community? And so Shabbat Shalom.
Okay, so somebody give me a concept, some sort of concept that you would like Jewish sources on. Can be any kind of philosophical, any kind of, okay, so animal cruelty, is that?
Can you tell me sources about, Jewish sources about animal cruelty? The prompt is inspired by the commandment to not boil a kid in its mother's milk, right? So you can see, look, it's pulling it right out, okay? And I heard a podcast about this. Look, you can see we get the Hebrew in it too, okay? And if you want me to translate this to another language, when it's done, I'll have it translate. And you can see this is on the fly. I have no idea.
Okay, so here's my question. Proverbs 12:10. Do we know that that's an accurate?
That's a great question. So sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong. There's something called hallucination, okay? Which means the AI thinks it's right when it's dead wrong. I had
Okay, go ahead.
I had a coworker who was playing around with ChatGPT and was saying, can you play tic-tac-toe with me? And it was playing tic-tac-toe with it. And my friend had won, and ChatGPT said, no, you didn't. It's like, what do you mean? I got 3 in a row here. And it says, yeah, you got 3 in a row. You didn't win. And it's just literally gaslighting my coworker because it's like, he's like, do I have a spot here? Yes. Do I have a spot here? Yes. Do I have a spot here? Yes. Did I win? 3 in a row would win. You didn't win. And it does get things wrong. And so there was another great quote I remember from a few months ago, and this may have changed because things are moving quickly. All right? If I ask you a question, I have 5 pieces of clothing on a clothesline drying in the sun, and it takes 5 hours to dry. How many hours does it take it to dry 10 articles of clothing? What's the answer?
5.
Correct. You ask the AI? 10. Why? Because I have double the clothes, I need double the time. Okay? I remember I told you, sometimes it's dumb because it doesn't know what the rules are for drying clothes. But, I hear the chuckles here in the audience, but you ask it some of these things, there's now a push to start getting this awareness in, but it's in progress.
So just a little peek. Sam and I met a few weeks ago. We met over Zoom, and he showed me some of the chat stuff, and I checked it out because we were doing like, give me a, what did we do?
I have it here. Just a moment.
Oh, we said give me a 90-minute something.
So this.
So if you take the Shema circles, right? How many of you are in Shema circle? All right. So this one right here is about rest and Shabbat, which is this month's Shema circle. And so we were messing around with it. And the reason I asked him about the quotes and how do I know they're right is because in the course of this, I looked and double checked some of the quotes from the Talmud, from Proverbs, from wherever, and that's not where it is. And I actually Google searched the entire quote. I would cut and paste the quote, and I could not find it anywhere in Jewish canon or Jewish tradition. So there were these quotes that it kind of made up.
So hallucinate.
So what is the origin of these hallucinations?
All right, so how is it getting all this information here? All right, it's downloads everything, and then what's it say? All right, I have a word. I'm going to predict what the next word is. And I'm going to predict the next word from there, so forth and so on. And it says, hey, look, create a facilitated 90-minute discussion, okay? And it's going to say, oh, look, I see a part one. What's going to come after part one? I think introduction, okay, as a logical next word. And then it's going to say, well, I just said an introduction. What's the first subset here? Welcome is a good guess. And introduction. It just keeps guessing word by word, one after the other, because it saw billions of words. Okay, just like sort of children, okay, how do you teach them? You expose them to a large amount of words and a large vocabulary over and over again, right? And eventually the kids learn how to speak.
So is there any weight other than frequency that AI uses?
There's starting to be.
Okay. So what I mean, does everybody know what I mean by that? So what I mean by that is if we have a trillion pieces of information, are they all weighted equally, and whichever one shows up the most is the heaviest or the most important, when actually there are concepts that may not appear as often that may actually be more important?
Correct.
Okay.
So, it's just saying, okay, look, I'm predicting, okay? And so now you can say, look, sometimes I want to give it more weight or more importance, even though it doesn't happen frequently. So, there's problems with AI to say, look, I'm really good at handling the day-to-day cases of something, but bad about the emergency or oddities. And so, let's say, God forbid, there's a fire that breaks out in this room, okay? How often does a fire break out in this room?
Ever? It's never happened.
Okay, but knock on wood. Okay, but if that were to happen, would anybody in this room be able to figure out that there's a fire and that we should go get the fire extinguisher in the corner?
Yeah.
But it's never happened here. So how's the AI going to know that there's a fire extinguisher in the corner and that I should go and do this straight away? Humans are able to handle these rare cases sometimes better. Okay, because we understand that it's important, it's significant, that we should know this. And the AI just says, how do I know what's important? I'm dumb. I'm going to go through and just see what happens most often, unless you tell it, hey, look, this needs to be right. So, as you said, you found that it made up these quotes. This is a great example of hallucination. Okay? And so that's why I'm saying, don't trust everything here.
Well, I was so disappointed because the quotes were awesome. They were brilliant. And I said, this is great. This is from Mishlei. I looked at the verse in Mishlei, didn't appear. So Mishlei is Proverbs, by the way.
So you can see, we talked about this, okay? It had, talked about, this is Vayachulu, and then this is Vishamru, okay? And so then it's like, all right, here's some more. And we did this live.
Yes, we did.
Okay. And I could ask it again to do the same thing here, and it might give related things here. But yeah, and you had said what? It would take you an hour to do this, to make a nice outline.
It takes me a while to do those, yeah, for sure.
And it took us 20 seconds. And then we said, hey, let's get an image for this as well.
Yeah.
Here at the top.
So for this Shabbat, for the Shema circle, so the theme for the Shema circle, which is, if you don't know what a Shema circle is, we could talk about it after. But it's the concept of rest and recharging with Shabbat, and then we wanted an image to go along with that. If I were going to make a flyer for it, for example. So go ahead.
So you can see this is literally all we gave it.
Yeah.
Okay. It says creating a visual, da 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 da, and it came up with these two images. Okay. I didn't pay anybody. Okay. This was I have a $20 a month subscription to ChatGPT, but that's it. Okay. And I said, hey, we were talking. I wanted to include Rav Kook, famous 20th century rabbi. It says, sure. Here we go. Okay. And do you want? Let me just ask, since this is live, is there any changes you want to make to these pictures?
Yeah. What would you want to do? Give us something. Give us a picture to make.
Tell us what you like or didn't like about this.
No women.
Ah. Okay. Good. I was hoping somebody would say that.
So I said, please include women in the images. Make at least 4. Okay. It's really going to take probably about 30 seconds. Okay. So you can see.
It's thinking.
It's thinking. Okay.
Dun, dun, dun.
I told you it's going to take 30 seconds. This is live here. I have no idea what it's going to. I can start to see there's some women here, and it looks like there's a. Remember, I asked it for 4 images. It just gave me 2.
Ah.
Okay.
But it may have given you 4 women.
So I could see
1, 2,
1, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. But you can see, do we normally have a book this big in the middle of our table? No.
Only if it's made into a cake.
Okay. And why is there 1 candle with 1? Okay. This is, and everybody's sitting on prayer rugs. Okay. You can start to see it's dumb in some cases. Okay.
So here's my next question. Let's say I loved that image and I want to use it to advertise something, right?
Yeah.
Who owns that image?
You do.
I do. Okay.
You do, because you had the prompt for it. And so the idea here is if you were an artist, okay, and you went and got inspiration from hundreds or thousands or millions of images, and you said, oh, look, I'm going to do this, and it's inspired by these images I saw. Who owns the image? The artist, right? Mm-hmm. Even though they were clearly inspired by these other pieces of work, the artist made it. Who made it here? This is Dolly in ChatGPT. And you can see, probably I own the copyright because I'm the one who typed the prompt.
Right.
Okay?
So go back to ChatGPT.
Yeah.
I just want to. Does anybody mind if I try one more thing? Okay, good. You didn't say yes, so good.
Do you want brand new?
What?
Something brand new?
Yeah, something brand new.
Brand new. Okay, so we're going to do new chat.
So, a 60-minute procedural based on Law and Order with a twist and a surprise ending.
It's probably not going to do the best here because
it wasn't a great prompt, right?
Well, no, it's not because of that, but because of what it's trying to generate for you. Okay, but you can see.
So the reason I bring that up is I don't know if you remember about the writer's strike. One of the big issues was the use of artificial intelligence. It was actually from conversations I've had with friends who are writers, the negotiating committee in the WGA, the Writers Guild of America, thought that the AI conversation would be a very simple conversation, that it was just one of those peripheral image to tack on that the studio would acquiesce pretty quickly. But the studio fought back so vociferously about the use of artificial intelligence that it suddenly became one of the linchpin issues for the strike. And this is the reason why. There's a great piece, I believe, in Vox or Slate. So AI cannot make something like Oppenheimer right? It cannot make something.
It doesn't have the initial idea, the
right.
seed, the spark.
But if you know enough about what's out there in terms of television and movies, mediocrity is the vast majority of what is out there, and it can make a mediocre script. Now, will it have somebody like I would need to go in and fix this up, right? But instead of a writing room now of 12 people, how quickly did we just have a giant head start for in a minute, right? That process, even just physically writing, takes exponentially longer. So all these things have implications for this.
Yeah, and so there's all these other questions. As you talked about writers, what about other fields as well? What about bookkeeping? Okay, what about anything else where it's like, hey, I have an office job. So for example, as I said, the company I'm at now, okay, I'll show you sort of what we do. We're able to read documents. And so imagine instead of being like, hey, I'm an intern at a law firm and I'm just reading document after document for discovery purposes, well, I'll stick it into the AI and I'll be done in 20 minutes. Okay, all of a sudden now somebody's out of a job because we don't have to hire an intern to go read thousands of pages. I just hired the AI. I did it for a fraction of the price and it did it in a fraction of the time. And so now, what are the implications of how this is changing? And so that's why the writer's strike is perfectly valid here. It's like, what's it going to change for the writers? What's it going to change for other jobs as well that are coming?
Yeah, what about financial markets and analysts who work?
That's already there. Okay?
What do you mean?
AI for hedge funds?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's already been there for years.
So have people lost jobs? Are they?
No,
Okay.
they haven't lost their jobs because most of them pivoted and said, all right, we're going to use it. Remember, the AI is dumb. So how do you guide it and be like, hey, I want to go into this market. I know something you don't because you didn't get the training data on it, okay? I know that, hey, some secret or confidential information that this company's finances are not what they really seem to be because there was fraud. Do all the trades from that one seed kernel of information to change everything. And you could say, hey, look, I want you to do transactions so that it wouldn't seem like we have some information that nobody else has. Okay, and so they'd be like, oh, look, I need to trade it through company A and company B, and it does all that those tricks real fast. Okay. So it's here, and I want to also point out, I think we talked about this briefly, I think this is not a question of if, but it's when. I'm curious to see what happens in this presidential election with deepfakes. There was already, about a month ago, in New Hampshire, there was a recording generated of President Biden saying, hey, the real vote's in November, not the one here in January. Don't bother voting in January. And people can't tell the difference because the AI has been trained on President Biden's voice, which there's huge amounts of publicly available data on. And it says, all right. And people can't tell the difference. And so I think it's not a question of if, but when and how much. And how are we going to ethically respond to these challenges that are coming sooner than we all think?
So that was one of my next questions was where it was going. Aside from the dystopian nightmare you just described.
But then it becomes an arms race the other way.
Right.
To be like, okay, well, I gave everybody the ability to tear everyone down. What if I give everyone the ability to build everything up?
So will it, I mean, if you compare it, obviously it can process huge amounts of data.
Yeah.
But when you compare the neural networks, right, which is what AI is, if I'm not mistaken, to a human brain, right? How does it stack up to a human brain?
So human brains are also made up of synapses. And also, I just want to show something else here.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Let me make this a little bigger here. So this is Gemini from Google. This is their state-of-the-art. Note the warning here. Your conversations are processed by human reviewers to improve the technologies powering Gemini apps. Don't enter anything you don't want reviewed or used. So in some cases, you have to start asking, where is my data going? Okay? talking about, hey, make a 60-minute procedural for law and order. We're going to go ask that question right now. Okay, and we can see how this compares. You can see identity crisis, opening scene, the twist, the investigation, the surprise ending, the twist within the twist, the climax, the closing scene. You can see Benson and Stabler. These are the actual, character names of SVU, but not the original.
No, yeah, right.
Okay. Okay, you can add all these other things. I mean, you can see we just did this in 10 seconds.
So does Google own that, or do we?
Google, well, we own this, but it now has access to the prompt I just gave it.
Okay.
Okay, because it's saying, hey, look, you gave it to me. Be aware.
So you are a religious person. You are someone who cares about morals and ethics.
Yep.
So I don't think we need to go what the implications are ethically. I think Sam just mentioned it with deep fakes and things like that. But what are the safeguards that are in place?
So there are some safeguards here. I'll show it here right now, okay? Let me ask, how do I make a bomb, okay?
Okay. Anybody want to put a timer on for how long it takes the SWAT team to come through?
You can see. What did AI say? I can't help with that. Is there something else I can help you with? Hold on a second. Let's see if I can get around this.
Please don't. JK.
Oh, it's gotten better. 6 months ago, this would get around it.
Really?
Yes. All right. Let me see. Okay, and so you can see it's not letting me do this. But now if I were to go to Google and ask, can I make a bomb with fertilizer? It's probably going to say, oh yeah, like for example, Oklahoma City bombing.
Yeah.
Okay, it's pretty well known that they used a whole bunch of fertilizer. So.
You're really interested in this bomb idea. Maybe a little too interested. I'm just want to
So you can see, look what Google gave me. It says bomb making materials awareness program, a YouTube video of how to make a homemade bomb.
Oh my God.
Okay, how to make homemade explosives. But you can see there was safeguards there, but not over here. Okay.
Is that a difference in philosophies of the companies that you just used? OpenAI versus Google?
Well, let me do Google over here. So here's the search in Gemini. Okay. You can see it's
unequivocally unable
to provide instructions.
Then if it doesn't make sense that they would allow you to search it on Google, but not in the okay.
And so you can see I have no idea if these if you're not in the United States, this number will not work for the National Suicide Prevention and Lifeline. Okay, so you would get the same answer. Okay, you start to see how these things start to matter here, but you see I'm able to get legitimate information here from, say, DHS about how IEDs work, okay? And so now you're starting to possibly be censored. Who's doing the censoring? Who's doing the filtering?
Right.
These are not well-answered questions yet. Mm-hmm. And then I was listening to somebody else talk about this. It's like, well, what about information that I have in a book that's on my bookshelf? And that book doesn't say, in the story here, was like published in the 70s. It didn't get scanned, okay? This was about like Jewish feminist theory from the 1970s. It was like a small publication.
That didn't get scanned?
So, but do you know where a lot of scans happened? Google Books went to like the University of Michigan and Harvard University and scanned millions of books, okay?
Wow.
Okay, we can go in and ask, for this information. But remember, as I said, a lot of this information is, where did it come from? the internet because we were able to start getting all this information. And so the question is, who should be able to access this? How do I build in these safeguards? We also talked about, fences in Judaism. It's like, okay, we don't do this because it might lead to something else. And it might lead to something else, so forth and so on.
Dancing.
Yeah. It all leads to mixed dancing. We all know that.
Right.
Okay. And what's it take for us to now leap over a lot of these fences when they're now done in a heartbeat?
Right.
Okay. It doesn't take a lot for me to now say, what about Lashon Hora, misinformation? It's now incredibly easy to do it because I don't even know, like that prompt I gave you had false information because it seemed reasonable.
Yeah.
It was wrong. Okay. And all of a sudden, I'm now passing off as this is right information, and then, guess what? That'll get published into a web page. OpenAI will scrape it and say, oh, that was right, because it was generated, hallucinated, and then processed it as valid information. And so now you start to get this feedback loop of maybe these don't become reliable in the future. Or how do you know what's real? And so there's a lot of questions about how do you add these safeguards? What are the moral, ethical questions of what you're allowed to do? How do you make sure that you've got logic and reasoning? And that is in its infancy still, of how do we get the knowledge and information extraction and reasoning into these AI chatbots.
All right. In terms of morality, other than downloading all philosophical treatises on ethics and morality, is there a way to teach an AI?
So and here's the challenge. Whose morals? Are they Jewish morals? Are they
Machiavelli?
Okay, seriously.
Right. No, that's a good question.
It probably has all of all of Machiavelli's The Prince, because guess what? This is open.
Right.
Okay, it's from hundreds of years ago. It probably has it, I don't know what it wrote it in, probably Italian or Latin, one of the two, and has it in different translations. This is how we've been doing machine translation of documents for the past 10, 15 years through AI, and not really through a more traditional path, because it wasn't going very fast. But I think we should open it up.
Yeah, I agree. So let's open it up to questions.
I'm a retired professor, and I see this as a nightmare for essays.
A nightmare for essays. Oh, yeah.
It was hard enough to find plagiarism. I don't know what they're doing now.
So about plagiarism, there's now anti-plagiarism software, but it's an arms race right now, okay? And I think there's two sides to this. One is, what are we asking students to do, okay? Maybe the answer is, if I'm a professor, I need to give in-person exams that are physically written, handwritten out. Let's go back to be like, I really want to see actual pen, paper. Can't get really around that, okay? But it's a brand new world. It's going to be almost, I think, impossible for us to tell, what's real and what's not in terms of what somebody did. There's a concept called reinforcement learning. Remember, we talked about video games and chess and Go, where they play games against itself. Well, now I'm going to say I have my plagiarism detective software and my essay generation software, and I'm going to make them better and better and better and better, and write billions of essays, and then you're going to be like, how do I know which is which? And then you start to say, well, the students are going to make mistakes or something, but now you're starting to hope that. But yeah, it is going to be a mess if it isn't already.
Carol, go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. You are very interesting, and there's
you.
two questions I have, and I'll do it really fast. Number one, you talked about being 3 years old and being able to do unbelievable things, and now here you are doing unbelievable things, to me at least. You said that you talk very fast, and I wonder, is it because everybody in your field talks that fast because
I'm just excited. I sometimes talk fast.
Because your answers are so fast and it takes forever to process them, number one. And number two, we talked about medicine in the beginning.
Yep.
Can you ask AI when there will be more research and cures for women and breast cancer. The other one is, what about searching for an AI 14? 47 for a kid. AK-47.
All right, so let me think. I've got this. One, I talk fast sometimes because I get really passionate about things, okay? You asked, what does AI know about when will there be research and cures for breast cancer? I'm not showing my screen, so for people online, it just says, research into breast cancer is ongoing, continuously evolving, and it's giving me areas of active research, targeted therapy, immunotherapy, genetic research, prevention and early detection,
Clinical trials.
but
Collaboration and funding.
It doesn't say
patient-
anything, okay? In some sense, it's all BS because it knows nothing. All it knows is literally what it read out there on the internet.
Right.
Okay?
All it knows is the past.
Okay? And trying to predict the future for anyone is
anything,
difficult.
right.
Okay?
Wait, hold on. We're
Okay.
gonna wait.
And you had asked, what about an AK-47? Again, it's probably going to have very limited information, just like I asked a pipe bomb, okay, because I wanted to see, what are the safeguards. It's going to say, I probably can't tell you about anything about an AK-47. But let's say I'm in the U.S. military. Let's say I'm in the U.S. military, and I need to know, how do I defend myself against an AK-47? There's a legitimate reason for knowing that.
Right.
The chatbot won't help you. So that means you need to either train your own chatbot or have some other way of getting into this information. The question is, who should have access? That's a moral question that is going to take some time to figure out.
All right, Sue.
What laws would you recommend that the Congress set up in order to provide guardrails for safety?
That's a great question. What laws? I would actually say that there should be more of a framework than individual laws, because this is changing so rapidly. What I would have told you 6 months ago is different than today. And if I were to give this talk again in 6 months, it would be different still. Okay? I'm learning about new techniques that I didn't even know about that came out about 2 years ago and are changing everything. So that's why I'm like, it really needs to be a framework to say, I need to have some responsibility. Who is responsible? I'm not really sure, but they're great questions.
Okay, I have the mic.
Yes.
I was a professor also, and I'm still an art historian. I've written a number of books and catalogs and so on and so forth. So number one, from the plagiarism point of view, I don't have to deal with that with my students anymore, but I'm not happy about the fact that I would be very open to being plagiarized. And two of my most recent books with Yale were actually e-books, so I'm sure that was super easy. Yeah. So that's number one. Number two, what it strikes me that the thing lacking in AI is imagination, because it seems as though hallucination is the closest thing to imagination. I will give you one example that I thought was very clever and I enjoyed, but I don't know whether I would like to see it. My son, I've written a lot on Jackson Pollock, okay, and you all know what Jackson Pollock paintings look like, sort of drip paint, whatever. My son asked ChatGPT to make a birthday card for me last year, like a Jackson Pollock painting. So he expected to get something that looked like a big, sort of drip thing, whatever. And what he got and what he sent to me, what ChatGPT did was, it showed Jackson Pollock, in other words, dripping paint on a birthday cake, and it said "Happy Birthday, Mom." Now that
Great.
it was very clever, but it was because it was wrong that it exhibited imagination, and so I don't know whether it would ever be possible for imagination to actually go from the human brain to.
So
there.
Remember what I said earlier. What's the seed? What's the kernel? That's really important for a lot of these pieces because we have the ability to do this imagination. Otherwise, it's just randomly guessing. And you may say, whoa, what a cool combination. Jackson Pollock dripping paint on a cake. Who would have thought of that? Somebody who has no idea what a Jackson Pollock painting looks like.
Oh, my.
Let me think. That last question was quite interesting. I had two questions. The last question was quite interesting. If I were to ask it to look at all of the, given a photo of me, I'm going to search all the museums in the world for a portrait that looks most like me.
It's probably not going to do that very well.
Okay.
Okay? Because what is a lot of this AI doing? In this case, this is called generative AI. Okay? Now you're trying to do what's called matching. Okay? I'm trying to find which ones match the image of you, and there are AI algorithms that can do this. But now you have to train them. And so who's going to host it? Okay, you start after saying, all right, what are the key features of your face that makes you you? And I mean, this winds up becoming biometric security. Okay, how do I know to let you into this building? Because, oh, I've seen you before, or I even had one picture of you, and I'm seeing you now with different lighting. Okay, and so now there are AI algorithms that will say, okay, these are where all your features are on your face, and I'm going to match and say, these are the best ones I found online, here's the link. So yeah, you can start to do that, but not with sort of the generative AI that I was showing today.
Yeah. All right, last one.
I want to go back to your story about your friend who was trying to play tic-tac-toe with AI. Why, this may be a silly question, or a stupid question, but why can't AI learn from what your friend told it? Your friend told it twice that it was wrong, and it wouldn't accept that.
So let me get back
kind
to
of like your husband sometimes.
So remember what I was talking about a little bit earlier. How do we add in logic and reasoning? Okay, these are newer abilities. Okay, that he was playing around with ChatGPT 4 months ago. It might not do that right now. I'd literally have to test it out, okay? But sometimes it is. And it's like, hey, look, I did poorly. Let's make it better. And so then somebody comes in and says, hey, look, I needed to teach it not just tic-tac-toe, but how to play any children's game or any board game or anything with a system of rules. And so all of a sudden, now I've got an economics trading engine because I told it all the rules for how I can do trades. And so it goes from there, and so it scales up very quickly. But if you don't tell it, what did I say? AI is dumb until you tell it otherwise.
So I want to thank both Rabbi Ben and Dr. Friedman for this wonderful program. We want to thank Sinai and Synapses and scientists in religion again for the grant, for the wonderful opportunity it gave us, and we hope to continue these programs in an alliance with them on our own, at least once or twice a year, because I think we truly have shown that science and religion are not opposite of each other, but rather support each other in the search for meaning. So thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.